Hello outdoor fans and welcome to a slightly different video this week, because if you noticed, I'm not out riding my bike on mountains. But that's because I wanted to talk about some lessons we can learn from New Jersey. It's an absolute mess, blurring of lines between an e-bike and a motorbike. These are my opinions, you're welcome to have your own. This is something that I just feel strongly about. And why do I think it could happen here? I don't think it's controversial to say that politicians can sometimes do daft things on a clear boundary between what is a pedelec. It's not supposed to be the most powerful that current technology can make. And technology isn't going to stop. It's going to keep moving on. With a cycle, we have immense countryside access. And that may be controversial. If you ride a bike or a pedelec class e-bike on a footpath, that is not criminal. You should always have the number one rule of don't be a dick. So what I'm asking is, as a community, that we should champion the pedelec. We should champion the fact that it is a cycle. We should embrace its limitations, that it is just a cycle. So the e-bike laws in New Jersey have changed dramatically, and there's one massive lesson that I think here in the UK we can take from that change to make sure that we don't end up in the same situation. Specifically, I think there is one big lesson that we here in the UK, and to be honest a lot of the world, can learn from what has happened in New Jersey. So if you don't know what has happened in New Jersey, basically all e-bikes, even the low-powered pedelec e-bikes, are now classed as motorbike. You need insurance, a reg plate, a proper motorbike helmet to ride any e-bike. You can no longer use cycle lanes with an e-bike, and there are problems in state forests. It's an absolute mess. But the one lesson that I think we can learn here, the reason it all happened, is the blurring of lines between an e-bike and a motorbike, or a moped, or an e-moped. But what differs, what is not a cycle, that blurring of the lines, that grey area, that's where the problem is, and that is something that we also have a problem with here in the UK. If you want to know more about the specifics, then our man Seth at Burn Peak, Seths Bike Hacks, he's done a couple of excellent videos on it. I'll link them in the description below. But go and check them out. They give a full overview of what's happening, or what has happened in New Jersey, and even that other states are looking at similar tweaks to their e-bike laws. So why should we care in the UK? How will that law in New Jersey affect us? Well, it won't. But the lessons from it, they are something we can learn, so that nothing similar happens here. And just a quick note to say that these are my opinions. You're welcome to have your own. You're welcome to share your opinion in the comments. This is something that I just feel strongly about, so I had to make a video. So yeah, it's my opinion. So what is the lesson? Well, as I alluded to earlier, it's the blurring of the definition between a cycle, between a low-powered e-bike and a moped or a motorbike. So there were lots of things that led up to the change in New Jersey, but very simply, and if you watch Seth's video, you will see the full info. Some parents bought their 13-year-old kid what they thought was a bike, a cycle, an e-bike, but it wasn't. It was a high-powered moped. Because of these blurring of lines, they didn't know the difference. That kid crashed, the accident was fatal, there was a lot of media coverage, politicians got involved, and as we all know, these things don't necessarily follow any common sense, and in the end, they ended up with this change in the law, all because this blurring of the lines between what is a cycle, a pedelec, a moped, and a motorbike. And why do I think it could happen here? Because we already have that same problem of blurring of the lines. And even now we have the media reporting on e-bikes and police cracking down on e-bikes, mainly in, well, near enough exclusively in urban areas. The sort of drug dealers on Surons and the delivery drivers on their self-converted throttle 40 mile an hour, keep up with traffic mopeds with no licence or insurance. So, but always in the press, always in the comments on social media, the term used to describe these bikes is e-bike. So if we don't distinguish between a pedelec cycle and an e-moped, we are just one incident away in the UK from having similar draconian action. I don't think it's controversial to say that politicians can sometimes do daft things, that the media can get on bandwagons and hype things up, that pressure groups can get involved with their uninformed opinions on a variety of topics. And that could happen with e-bikes in the UK, especially when the lines are so blurred. For me, as a community, I think we need to work on a clear boundary between what is a pedelec, what is a cycle, an e-bike that we know as an e-bike, and not have a grey zone or wishy-washy definition of what is an e-bike. Let's remember the pedelec class is supposed to be a cycle to an equivalent to a pedal cycle. It's not supposed to be the most powerful that current technology can make. And it's not supposed to be a bike that can keep up with traffic in an urban environment. That would be a moped. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be nice or even have any practical difference if we had a US style 20 mile an hour speed limit instead of what many people regard as a restrictive 15.5 mile an hour limit on the current UK pedelec laws. And that's an opinion many of you out there have too, and do have a 20 mile an hour limit. But this is the start of a blurring of the line. A start that could lead us down a path of being lumped in with the high-powered motorbikes and in the future losing access. We all know that technology moves fast. It's just a year and a bit since the Avinox motor came out, and where we had sort of 600 watt motors before, we're now on 1,000 watts, and as well DJI made it very easy to switch between the various area speed limits, even selecting a New Zealand 28 mile an hour. So from that 250 watt nominal pedelec, we've now got 1,000 watt motors that with a couple of presses of a button, you can have a 28 mile an hour limit on. And technology isn't going to stop. It's going to keep moving on. There's rumours that we're a few months away from the latest M2 Avinox motor. Don't know what the specs are going to be. Is that going to be 140 newton meters and 1,300 watts? And still a pedelec? And then when that starts getting de-restricted, are we start going to see problems where we don't see problems now, where we only see problems with the likes of Surons? I don't know, but I think it's a conversation that we should have, and that is one of the reasons I'm making this video. I don't want to single out Avinox, DJI or Suron for causing us problems, but if we have this grey area between what is a cycle and what is a moped, then I think we are, as is proven in New Jersey, setting ourselves up for future problems. For me, the main difference, selfishly some might say, is countryside access. With a cycle, we have immense countryside access. Not only do we have legal rights to the entire bridleway network, but we sort of have rights to the footpaths as well. And that may be controversial, and particularly when I'm talking about laws and chipping and the grey area between bikes and motorbikes. But let's look at what the legal difference makes in the countryside between a cycle and a motor vehicle. But first, a quick disclaimer: I am not a lawyer. Don't use this as a legal defence. Do your own research, but let me just explain the law. If you ride a bike or a pedelec class e-bike on a footpath, that is not criminal. The police cannot be called. It is a civil offence of trespass only. You can be sued for damage, so don't do any damage. You're actually doing the exact same offence as if a hiker is wild camping. I also wild camp, you may also wild camp. The rules of wild camping are basically leave no trace, as in do no damage. That for me is the same etiquette I apply when riding my bike on a footpath. Do no damage, leave no trace. I have to say that whether you are wild camping or you are riding your bike or pedelec cycle on a footpath, it can be criminal if the landowner or the landowner's agent asks you to leave. If you don't leave at that point, then it is aggravated trespass, and that can be criminal. And on that, do watch out for no cycling signs. Not that I'm aware that it's ever been an issue, but as we'll get onto with some section 59 stuff later on, if there is a sign, that can be taken as being told. So watch out for those no cycling signs on footpaths. So let's contrast that to trespass in a motor vehicle or a cycle that isn't a pedelec, because then it is a motor vehicle. It's exactly the same offence in regards of the law. I'm a keen green laner. Here is my Jimny. I take it on many a green lane. And if I take my Jimny, a Suron, a quad, a Land Rover, chipped e-bike that can only do 20 mile an hour, if I take that even on a bridleway, then I am liable for a criminal offence. And here we are talking about section 59 of the Road Traffic Act, and that can be a criminal prosecution. It can be points on your licence, it can affect your insurance for your car, it can affect the vehicle in the terms of a bike or a motorbike, it can affect the vehicle that you used to take your non-compliant vehicle off-road. Now you do get one warning in every 12-month period for the most drastic measures of the section 59 Road Traffic Act, but still it's a big difference from the maximum of being sued for damage that you have not created and being asked to leave if you are on a cycle compliant, pedelec compliant e-bike. So I'm sure you've seen those section 59 warning notices around trail centres or where common off-roading nuisance driving motorbikes, Suron use is found. And that sign constitutes your first warning of a section 59, so they can go straight to the confiscation and crushing of the offending vehicles. Hence why I warned about the no cycling signs earlier for pedalling a compliant e-bike on a footpath. If the signage is good for a section 59, maybe it's good to up your trespass to aggravated trespass if you disobey a no cycling sign. But again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't really know. These are just some things that I have thought about and things that I consider when I am riding my pedelec on a footpath. Now I have to say that I don't think any of these section 59 consequences are going to happen at the moment to any mid-drive no throttle e-bike, no matter what your speed limit is. In terms of the way the law is written to the way it's enforced, it is not going to make any difference, in my opinion, at the moment. But these blurring of the lines between a cycle, between a pedelec and an e-moped, in the future, be it in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, if we don't have a clear definition of what is a bike, a cycle, what is a moped, then we could have the same problems as happened in New Jersey. But I do think you'd have to be doing something pretty stupid on a non-throttle e-bike to have any police attention at the moment, like properly stupid. And always, whenever you're riding, even if you're riding a push bike on a bridleway, you should always have the number one rule of don't be a dick. As in, respect other trail users. Even if you are allowed to be there, you should respect the other trail users. You know, if you come across horses, slow down. If you're passing walkers, whether it's on a bridleway or a footpath, slow down way more than what you need to be. Be polite, don't be a dick, have good inter-user group interactions, and that will help us keep our access that we have. And we do have fantastic access to the countryside here in the UK, not quite as good as Scotland in England, but it's still pretty good. So let's keep it that way. That's my concern, that if we carry on along the path that we are going on, we will lose that countryside access that we have. As I say, I don't think it's a massive problem at the moment, particularly in the countryside. Maybe in the towns with the, the 40 mile an hour throttle bikes, but it's not a problem in the countryside. But at the rate the technology is going, at the sort of power wars that the mid-drive motor manufacturers are getting into now, and what we buy and what we want as consumers will drive that. And we are pushing towards that point in 5, 10 years, still in the time that I want to ride a bike, where we could lose access. That's why I'm making this video. We do need that clear line between what is a cycle and what is a moped. And the more that line gets blurred, the more that we blur it as a community, the more that the media just lump everything in with e-bikes. We are just that one instant away from politicians making rash calls and us having a very different environment in which to ride e-bikes. But we could have better user technology. If you look at the Swiss Maxon drive, it's 2 kilos. That's a chunk lighter than anything else out there. The DJI, that's 2.5 kilos. The Bosch, 2.8 kilos. Here's a list of some of the others. They're all getting towards 3 kilos. But the Maxon, small, 2 kilos, 90 Newton meters, 620 watts, with a light battery as well. Should we not persuade manufacturers to go down the route of a small, lightweight motor that is 700, 750 watts, rather than wanting something that is 1400, 1700 watts? I mean, what would you prefer? I know that I don't go everywhere in turbo. I want to ride my bike as far as possible. So therefore, something that is only 400%, 300% of my power input, rather than like the Avinox 800%, is going to go further. So what I'm asking is, as a community, that we should champion the pedelec, not negate it as being restrictive. We should champion the fact that it is a cycle. We should embrace its limitations, that it is just a cycle and not a moped. If you want more technology, There are the e-mopeds for around the urban commute. There are the e-motorbikes for use, but you don't have the same access. And yes, you might get away with some of those blurring the lines bikes at the moment in the countryside. But if we want to keep that, we need to keep cycles as cycles and keep pedelecs as a cycle class and not a moped class. And if we as a community can embrace that, and we can get the media to use the correct terminology when they're reporting on e-mopeds, or we embrace the term pedelec and call our e-bikes pedelecs instead of e-bikes to make that distinguish, maybe that's something. I don't know what the answer is, but I do fear a certain path that we might go down, a path that New Jersey has already gone down. So a decade ago, I was part of the Trails for Wales campaign with Open eMTB as part of my role within PMBA. And that Trails for Wales campaign went all the way to the Welsh Parliament and nearly got into law. And that would have actually given cycles the right to use footpaths without any change to the infrastructure. And it almost went through. It was only narrowly not adopted. Now, Cycling UK, they are starting to push that again for this next round, and it would be really good to get cycles in Wales legally, without trespassing, allowed on footpaths. That's not going to happen if people look at the fact that that will include pedelec bikes, look at all the e-bike press, make rash decisions on what is a pedelec and what is a moped, and go, we don't want motorbikes on footpaths. If we want that access, if we want Cycling UK to succeed this time with the second go at the Trails for Wales and allow us the legal right to not trespass when riding on footpaths, then it is very important that we maintain the difference between a cycle and a motorbike. That's why this is important. It's not about what the technology can do, as I've already said. It is about maintaining that a pedelec is a cycle. It is a pedestrian vehicle. It is not a motor vehicle, even if the technology would allow for an awesome motor vehicle style spec on an e-bike, particularly in the future. As I say, it's all a grey area, and that's what causes the problem. We need to ungrey that area. We need a firm divide between what is a cycle and what is a moped if we want to keep the access that we've got, or even improve that access. Wouldn't it be fantastic in the UK if we had Scottish style access where we could ride the bike up all the mountains, on the footpaths? You know, that for me would be much better than having a 2000 watt e-bike. That would be much more useful to me. Maybe it will be much more useful for you. We won't get there if that line is blurred between a pedelec and a motorbike. So I'll say this is all my opinion. You can have your own, put it in the comments below, but it does come from a position of riding mountain bikes since 1990 and riding footpaths since 1990, and being involved in mountain bike advocacy over the last decade or more with PMBA, with Open eMTB, as I say, as part of that early setup of the initial Trails for Wales campaign. I've been there speaking to councils, getting bridleways improved, helping with trail centres. I've been there at the forefront of the advocacy. I know how political that is and how we need to keep the right messaging.